Wisdom of the Body and the Control of the Non-Conscious. A presentation by Professor Gershom Zaitchik, Faculty of Medicine, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Introduction. Two entities operate in our body, the conscious, which I call mind, and the non-conscious, which I call Vob, wisdom of the body. Mind is all that I am aware of in me, like my thoughts, feelings, and will. Wisdom of the body, or Vob, is all in me which I am not conscious of. I described these two entities in several presentations. I am less concerned with their nature and mainly interested in their communication. It is striking that medicine is interested mainly in the conscious and less in the non-conscious. Yet the non-conscious keeps us alive and heals our self-healing diseases. Medicine does not provide any explanation how non-conscious heals some diseases and keeps us alive. For example, common cold heals by itself. I wonder, do similar healing processes operate also in cancer? Medicine finds such questions ridiculous, non-scientific, and even forbidden. Nevertheless, my question is still legitimate, while medicine lacks concept to handle it. The answer to my question requires an explanation on the nature of the non-conscious, which medicine lacks. Medicine knows that the unconscious exists and influences our existence. After all, we all got an id which interferes with our ego, yet neither Freud nor medicine explain how id keeps us alive. Last century, Starling and Cannon realized that even if all physiological processes in the body were understood, we still could not explain how they are controlled. This knowledge they attributed to the wisdom of the body. Since this wisdom of our body is non-conscious, I apply it as metaphor for the non-conscious. Mind serves here as metaphor for the conscious. Actually, they are operational definition for explaining the medical potential of the non-conscious. I am less concerned with their nature and mainly interested in their communications. I shall distinguish between two kinds of explanation or narrative. First-person explanation means how I understand my mind and Vob, known as I point of view. Third-person explanation is what medicine has to say about my mind and Vob. This presentation has three purposes. It is an introduction to the theory of wisdom of the body and summarizes what I said in other presentations. It explores ways how I may control Vob. And it is a suggestion how the theory of medicine might be simplified. The statement, I am less concerned with the nature of mind and Vob and mainly interested in their communication, is a simplification of medical complexity and reasoning. Example, communication between me or mind and Vob. I sit in a quiet room and imagine a steak. After a while, my mouth will become watery and my gut moves. The imagined steak is a message to Vob that I intend to eat, and it prepares the digestive tract to digest what I imagined. Between meals, digestive system is at rest. An enzyme called pepsin exists in two states. Between meals, it is inactive and called pepsinogen. During meals, it is activated and called pepsin. So my steak image activated pepsinogen to pepsin. My steak image is a message to WOB to activate pepsinogen. It is a core factor in pepsinogen activation, which is a biochemical process. And it activates a process in the non-conscious. Actually, my imagined steak activated myriad processes involved in digestion, and not only pepsin. Two definitions. Process is a biochemical atom of the organism. It has an input and output, is directed from input to output, and maintains a steady state. Function is a set of processes operating together. Activation of pepsinogen is a process. The function is a set of processes involved in digestion. So it's in this example. When I imagine a steak, I am activating the function of digestion. Now I would like to extend my control of WOP. What to imagine in order to activate other functions in WOP? Image and memory is explained in the following presentation. Neurological dimension of mind and WOP, and autism and WOP. And here you have a scheme which I am going to explain. We have the mind, the consciousness. It has a long-term memory and a short-term memory. We have the WOB, which is the non-conscious, and they are separated by a verge, which is a filter, I shall say, which does not let any information pass from WOB to mind. Then we have senses. Each sense has two channels, one direct to WOB and one direct to the short memory. My feelings in WOB are also conscious and enter the short-term memory. So again, whatever I imagine is stored in a memory. Mind has a short-time memory which integrates the now experience into an image. It has also a long-term memory which stores images of the past. Both memories are serial. WOB memory is parallel. It is embedded in its processes, which means all processes in WOB are its memory. Mind and WOB are separated by one-way filter called verge. Here again, the verge. It lets mind images into WOB and inhibits any message from WOB to mind. After all, WOB is non-conscious, so there is no message from it to the mind. Two channels communicate sense information. Conscious senses are connected to the short-term memory. They include also WOB messages which become conscious. Here is a WOB message which became conscious. Non-conscious channel connects senses directly to WOB. So mind receives information from its surrounding and from its body. All information is converted to images. Any information received by WOB restructures its processes. Each sense is converted into a distinct image. It is remembered in the mind as an image. Usually we take image to be a picture. A melody is an image of a sound. A smell of a steak or its taste are two distinct images of a steak. So image is more than a picture. You may regard it as a representation of a sense. I discussed it in the presentation on neurological dimension of mind and WOB. We think in images, not only when daydreaming, but always. Reality is represented in the mind as an image. Image is the only brain currency. Whatever is exchanged between mind and WOB is an image. Mind continually sends images to WOB, which converts them to action. The image steak is a prototype of a mechanism. Image modulates a function in WOB, which is non-conscious. Actually, there are two function modulations. Conscious or indirect, from mind mediated by image, and non-conscious, direct, when sense signal modulate WOB. A smell of a steak reaches WOB through two channels, direct, non-conscious, to WOB, and indirect by an image via the mind. So smell, mind, image, WOB, or smell directly to WOB. A function in WOB might be modulated indirectly with the mind image or directly via non-conscious senses. I shall reiterate an important statement which I regard as a law. Thought is an image. An image is the only currency of the mind, of consciousness. Any image or thought modulates WOB. A newborn baby is controlled by WOB and still lacks a mind. Smell of milk modulates directly, non-consciously, WOB digestion. As child grows, its mind grows with it, and it learns to modulate WOB indirectly. Initially, WOB endowed the baby with a mini-mind. When it grew and learned to speak, it created an association between the word steak and steak image. Later on, it created an association between steak image and digestion modulation. This process is known as conditioning. Definition. Conditioning is a process which creates an association between image and WOB function. I distinguish between two kinds of conditioning. Indirect via mind, requiring an image. Direct to WOB without an image. I distinguish between two kinds of conditioners, first person and third person. Pavlov trained his dog to salivate whenever it heard a ringing bell. Training established an association between bell ringing and meat supply, which is called conditioning. When somebody describes to you a juicy steak, you imagine it. The message is sent to WOB for modulation. Actually, you react to a suggestion. So what is a suggestion? Suggestion is an indirect mind conditioning. Pavlov conditioning is suggestive. When the trained or conditioned dog observed Pavlov, his conscious mind reminded him to expect a meat meal, whereupon he wagged his tail. Watching his master, the dog imagined the expected meat, and this message activated Wob. Dog behavior suggests that he has a mind and imagines like you and me. You might ask whether Pavlov might condition also a mindless dog in coma, which I called Wob conditioning. Imagine an anesthetized dog in a non-conscious coma. You train it as Pavlov did. Let it smell meat and ring a bell. Finally, the sound itself will activate salivation. This is Wob conditioning. Pavlov's experiment is a third-person conditioning, and so is my imagined state. Anything which I learned as a child is third-person conditioning. Generally, culture is a process of third-person conditioning. A newborn baby is a pure Wob without a mind. It does not image anything. Imagination requires a mind which is acquired during childhood. Images generated by culture conditioning are messages to Wob to modulate processes. Only in rare occasions or instances, like in the case of the steak, I know which function is activated by an image. Yet I am eager to broaden my control of Wob and turn to first-person conditioning. It is called bio or neurofeedback. You sit in front of a computer monitor. Your EEG is transmitted to the computer and displayed on the screen. You are instructed to focus on an alpha wave and raise it at its amplitude. And that's all. So do it. In the following weeks, you explore what in your behavior changes EEG pattern. What in your behavior raises the alpha wave. Once you succeeded raising the alpha wave at will, you associate it with an image. You choose Madonna. Whenever raising the alpha wave, you think or imagine Madonna. After additional training, you may abandon the computer. Whenever thinking or imagining Madonna, your alpha wave will rise. Training of first-person conditioning may be applied to control more useful functions. Monitor display is your elevated blood pressure, and thinking of Madonna lowers it. You can train yourself to do this. Or monitor displays your elevated blood sugar, and you can try with Madonna to correct it. Or monitor displays attribute of anxiety, and you imagine Madonna. Establish an association between an image and Wob function, and you are in control. Placebo effect. It is a manifestation of third-person conditioning by culture. You visit your doctor with an excruciating headache. First, he diagnoses your headache and then prescribes the medication. He says, you got an acute attack of cephalalgia. I got the right pill for you. It called Cephalgin. He gives you a colored starch pill. You haste to swallow it and your headache is gone. You are conditioned by society that anything your doctor prescribes works, yet society regards such a treatment as misconduct and which is forbidden. Placebo is a message from mind to Bob which activates an anti-pain function. The mechanism is explained in other presentations, like placebo activates biochemical processes and the placebo effect is biomedical foundation. The following paper describes the induction of placebo analgesia. It's a very interesting paper and called Neuropharmacological Dissection of Placebo Analgesia. I discuss it in the presentation Placebo Activates Biochemical Processes. But here is the essential of this, the essence of this experiment. A sphygmomanometer was placed around the upper arm and inflated to a pressure of 300 millimeter lasting 11 minutes. It induced pain, and pain is a message from Bob to mind. The training consists: pain induction is followed by morphine injection. It establishes an association between syringe image and pain relief. Test: pain induction followed by saline injection and pain is relieved. So here you have the scheme. Before the beginning of the experiment, you have a cuff which induces a hypoxia. The cuff induces hypoxia and results in a pain which is transmitted to the mind. This is the first step. Then you take a syringe with morphine, so you have an image of syringe which is directed to Bob, and there is no pain. So the cuff and the morphine are connected directly to Bob. And then comes the conditioned phase. You have again the image of the syringe, and then you have the cuff which induces hypoxia, but this time the volunteer received saline and there is no pain. So this is one experiment described in the paper which I mentioned before. The second experiment involves pain induction followed by morphine injection. Again, conditioning. It established an association between syringe image and pain relief. The test: pain induction followed by naloxone, then saline injection, and pain is not relieved. So we have the same experiment. You have the cuff inducing hypoxia. You have the conditioning with morphine, and there is no pain. And now you inject first of all naloxone and then saline, and there is pain. Naloxone is an opioid inverse agonist drug. It is used to counter the effects of opiate overdose. Since placebo response was inhibited by naloxone, it modulated the morphine pathway. So what you see, the cuff induces hypoxia. Bob experienced pain, but the pain is not transmitted to mind because it is inhibited by naloxone. Let's return, let's return to my headache. And I am conditioned by the society. I swallow the placebo pill. Mind, pill is a message to VoP, or the pill image is a message to VoP. And VoP relieves the headache exactly like in the previous experiment. From the biochemical perspective, placebo pill modulated a specific process which could be inactivated by naloxone. It acts as a genuine drug. In this way, mind may be conditioned to modulate any VoP function manifested by a VoP message. These experiments have far-reaching implications on therapy. Each treatment initiates a conditioning. Generally, physician is the conditioning agent, and his treatments are a mixture of specific and placebo responses. However, by properly designing how therapy is applied, it might be supplemented by a specific placebo. For instance, placebo might be interleaved in the ongoing treatment with steroids and so reduce and postpone their side effects. I described it in another presentation. Conclusion. I set out to explore ways how I may control non-conscious VoP. I think in images which signal VoP to modulate processes. Generally, I don't know which thought image is associated with a specific VoP function, but I can find it out with conditioning. With conditioning, I can get access to the non-conscious and even control it, either by myself, which is a first-person conditioning, or with the aid of medicine, which is third-person conditioning. Unfortunately, medicine still ignores the enormous therapeutic potential of the non-conscious. So in this endeavor, I am left to explore VoP by myself. That's all.